If you've been following my channel for a little while, then you know that I started my career in the museum field, and then in 2020 I decided to retrain to become a teacher. This was an incredibly divisive time to learn how to be a teacher, in part because of the debates going on around critical race theory. Because as I was learning about classroom management and adolescent psychology, I kept hearing about states that would ban entire topics from social studies classrooms. Now obviously this is a very anti-intellectual decision. The fallout of this being that people who are growing up right now are going to be limited in the tools that they have to understand their own lives and to communicate those experiences with others. See, on one hand, no high school teaches critical race theory because it's a graduate level analysis. So banning it shouldn't really do any harm, right? It doesn't get rid of anything anybody's actually doing. But it's not as simple as that, is it? Because nobody actually protesting for these anti-critical race theory laws understands what critical race theory is, because people don't read theory. But the lawmakers do, or probably they have somebody to read it and summarize it for them. And more to the point, they understand the consequence of having a voter base that understands the subtle yet powerful dynamics between the races. So they apply the term broadly to mean anything that a teacher says about race that they don't like, turning race in general into a terrifying and unspeakable thing. That's the point. So we acknowledge what they're doing and we understand the dynamic at play, but this video isn't really about them. The thing is, I can't talk to people who argue in bad faith. Nobody can. People who change the topic or retreat into a generality or argue against a straw man version of my argument, it can't be done. I would genuinely rather talk to somebody who I agree with just 70% of the time, but who argues in good faith when we disagree, over somebody who I agree with 90% of the time, but who argues in bad faith when we disagree. So this video isn't for the lawmakers, right? They're going to argue in bad faith in order to push gag bills. No, this video is for anybody who has genuine concerns about the fact that history is taught differently nowadays. It's not real history like they learned in school. And because I want to be real with you, this isn't just going to be a response video. I'm not just going to say what I think of these concerns and why. I want to use those concerns and my own, because I have concerns too, to move towards a way of teaching history that's both practical and theoretically sound. And I know that I am not going to have all of the answers by the end of this video or by the end of this series. I'm going to come up with a couple of ideas and I'm going to present what I come up with, but I would love to hear what you're thinking as well, so please leave your thoughts on the matter down in the comments below. In this first video, I want to take a closer look at why this concern exists. One of the reasons why history is so powerful as a discipline is that it creates the framework around which we organize our worldviews. Histories aren't just catalogs of information, right? They're structural arguments about how the world works and philosophical arguments about why it's important to learn from the past. And what this means is that the histories that you learn K through 12 have had a lasting impact on how you see the world. But like anything with an argument, there's a counter-argument, sometimes several, because while the past is the past, histories exist to make sense of the past. There's this really misleading trope in media that I think a lot of people have picked up on, where historians just really like old things. They worship the past. And as just one example, consider how in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, Bo's dads, both historians, keep showing off all of this old stuff.
Just wait till we show you the oldest part of our collection, a shard from an ancient, defunct runestone.
If it wasn't of historical value, that thing would be long gone.
This is the 1,000-year-old Colonia pitcher, and this tablet dates back over 2 millennia.
They never say why any of this stuff is important, just that it's old and that alone should be enough to make people care. And it's not. We don't save and cherish things because they're old. I mean, think about how you organize your house. You don't save things just because they're old. You save things because there's some memory attached, or it's particularly nice, or it's aesthetically pleasing, or it was a gift. Like when somebody comes over to your house and they see a photograph and they ask you about it, they're asking why it's meaningful to you, because without that story, it's at best aesthetically pleasing. and that's it. Histories and archives work the same way, and it's a big part of the reason why I don't like, either in social studies classes or on the news, when people say, just give me the facts. Just the facts. Well, okay, I suppose we could try. Arnante, 40, black, cook, laundress, and domestic. Bastien, 22, black, carpenter, coach, driver, and domestic. Genevieve, 35, quadroon, native of Illinois, domestic. George, 60, black, gardener. Francois, the old hunchback, black. Helene, 29, black, native of Senegal, domestic with her daughter Alyssa, 15, black. Jean-Baptiste, 25, black, shoemaker. Linder, 50, mulatto, cook. Just the facts! But who are these people and why are we listing them? I mean, I know who they are and I could contextualize these facts for you, but even doing that much would change how you relate to the facts. Even the act of putting two facts together imbues them with meaning that wasn't inherent to them, so maybe I've done too much already. When you read a history, you have to recognize that somebody has gone through the archives and personal papers and oral histories and business records and correspondence, etc., and has taken these facts and put them in a specific order. And that order is going to change how you consider the facts because it's prompting you to think of them as going together. And even if the author did no more than that, the act of curating this information imbues it with some meaning. And of course, most historians do far more. They narrativize, they make arguments. So maybe you decide that histories, monographs, textbooks, documentaries, it's just not for you. So you go to the archive and you want to get just the facts. Well, let's consider what order the records are kept in. Are they alphabetical, chronological, topical? Are they in original order? Have the photographs been separated from the rest of the records and kept in cold storage? And is that going to change how you relate to the archives? And what about the materials that don't get saved? Does that change our relationship to the materials that do get saved? You're starting to see now why just the facts is never just the facts. Just because something has been written in or excluded from a textbook doesn't make it neutrally important or equally unimportant. Even the blandest social studies textbooks will prompt you to adopt a worldview. So if this happened to you, first off, I'm very sorry that your history education was so boring, but also you have to recognize that this doesn't exempt you from having adopted certain biases about history. And biases aren't a bad thing. I certainly have mine. The trick isn't to have no biases. The trick is to understand your biases. Do your ideas hold up to scrutiny? And if they don't, is there a way to amend your ideas so that they do accommodate the new information you're getting? For example, when I heard that Canada was going to start paying for a year-long maternity leave, I had my concerns. I was raised to see fiscal responsibility as an intensely personal and family matter. You don't live beyond your means, and you only have the children you can afford. And as a child-free individual, both then and now, I was a little bit upset to see what I thought was somebody getting something for nothing. If you want money, you earn it. And if you want children, you support them. Why should the Canadian taxpayer support someone else's family? But as common as this line of thinking is, especially in my home country where we get 12 weeks of unpaid maternity leave, it's not the whole story. Most countries have more comprehensive maternity and paternity leave programs than we do in the States, and there are society-wide reasons and benefits for it. As a child-free individual, I benefit from having somebody else raise the next generation, feeding them, encouraging them to follow their dreams. You know, when I'm an old lady taking a cruise vacation, it's going to be nice to have young people working for me that I didn't have to go through the trouble and expense of raising myself. You could even say that I'm getting something for free. I mean, not the vacation, but the workforce. So having the taxpayer chip in and support all of this domestic work, making it just a little bit easier, is a worthwhile investment that people see just about everywhere else in the world. Was I biased at the beginning of this journey? Yeah. But then I tested my ideas against new information, and I adjusted my ideas accordingly. And I'm still biased, but my ideas hold up better under scrutiny, and that's the best any of us can do. History as a discipline works pretty much the same way. Historians see something happening in the world and they think, hey, this reminds me of something that happened in the past. If I put the pieces together this way, it sure would explain a lot about what's happening now. And then you go on to write your book or your article, and you tell people what knowledge can be gleaned from your memos and data sets and make recommendations for future research. And at any particular time, most of the histories that are being written are going to fall within a certain theoretical framework. One framing philosophy will get popular, and then for years, most of the histories are going to be published more or less saying the same thing. Different histories will be different case studies in this philosophy. And then one day, a new history is published that blows all the others out of the water. Maybe it has a different methodology, or maybe the gulf between academia and reality has just grown too wide. Like, you can only write the consensus theory for so long with the literal civil rights movement going on in the background. So history is a discipline very much of its time based in the reality-grounded inquiries of its practitioners. And if this process of continual reimagination and reinvention has been going on in the background for 30 years, and your kid brings home the 1619 project, you might be thinking, when did we decide that this was history? And I actually feel for people who have a casual interest in history, because it can be a lot to keep up with. And not only do theories keep changing, but things as simple as vocab words can keep changing meaning, and it can be jarring and unhelpful if you're not used to this kind of shifting sands. Like, for example, I was doing some research for a later video in this series, and one of the columns that I read defined Afrocentrism, political correctness, and multiculturalism in two different ways each. And there is a reason for this. Scholars like to mull over ideas that quite literally don't have words for them yet. So they use the words that they have to workshop the ideas, and as the ideas evolve, sometimes the words will change meaning. So it is literally not your fault if you get confused while reading this, or if you trip over weird vocab. Learning jargon on the fly is a learned skill. And I've actually got what I think are some pretty good examples of this in my Hammurabi video, and if I remember, I'll do the little eye thing. And that being said, it doesn't mean that kids these days are learning a worse history or a more opinionated history than what you learned in school. It just means that the historical conversation has changed, and as a result, K-12 teachers are making some minor adjustments to what gets included and emphasized in the curriculum. Now, I want to very briefly circle back to critical race theory, because it's the most extreme manifestation of this particular anxiety. Critical race theory is based in Black Studies, which is an academic discipline which originated in the 1960s and has stuck around in some form ever since then. It borrows its methodology from critical studies, which takes a look at how social, economic, political, historical, environmental forces act on individuals to create movements and ideas. That's it. It's not communism. The critical doesn't mean critical of whites. It's a way of understanding disparity between groups in a material sense. And it's favored by activists because things with material causes can have material solutions. But it's also kind of a moot point, because no high schooler is learning critical theory. High schoolers, smart high schoolers even, are asking whether Confucius came before or after Mao. They are not doing critical theory. So if you're still concerned about what high schoolers are learning, I would recommend the following approach. First, take a deep breath. There is often a world of difference between your knee-jerk reaction and what you would say and do if you take a moment to pause. Second, consider what current events might be focusing or refocusing historians' attention. History is a discipline that tries to contextualize current issues with a longer perspective. Third, remember that technology and research methods have changed over time. We may have even uncovered new information. There may in fact be new facts. Fourth, you can do a little research. Sometimes high schoolers are kind of inarticulate about what they're learning. They focus on little details rather than the big picture. They don't really know how to articulate why the thing they're being taught is being taught the way it's being taught, and sometimes they don't know that it was taught a different way before because they're a literal child. So while of course you should listen to your child and what they're getting out of their education, you can also do your own research. Google Scholar is a great resource. Go on and find some articles on the topic your child is learning about and just read the abstracts. The author of these papers is going to be a lot more articulate about what they're researching and writing and why it's important to have written it. You don't even have to invest a lot of time in it. Just read a couple of paragraphs. It'll take 10 minutes. And then number 5, you can talk to the teacher about what they're teaching your students. They can share lesson plan materials and even point you in the direction of the adult version of whatever they're teaching your child. Just like the historians themselves, the teacher will also have a solid grasp on what they're teaching and why they're teaching it. Now, if you've made it this far, you've probably worked past your itch to go out and protest critical race theory. And if you've decided against doing a little historical research, well, you're certainly limiting your ability to contribute to this particular conversation, so I hope you change your mind. Now, if you still have concerns about how history is taught, and this is certainly not the only thing to be concerned about, stick with me for part 2 and part 3 of this series. Don't forget to subscribe below and hit the notifications bell to be alerted when those come out. And until next time, make history.